It began with silence. Not the kind that settles before dawn, but the kind that follows a decision so monumental it steals the breath out of a room. Somewhere inside Buckingham Palace, King Charles III put his signature on a royal decree that would echo through centuries of tradition. The Duchess of Sussex title, once tainted, contested, and controversial, would no longer belong to Meghan Markle. It would pass to a woman who had never once sought the crown, the spotlight, or the storm that came with it. Zara Tindall. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yes, you heard that right. Zara and Elizabeth Tindall, the daughter of Princess and the granddaughter of the late Queen, and the royal who had spent her entire life on the edge of the royal spotlight, was now the new Duchess of Sussex. And the world gasped in unison. What pushed King Charles to make such a historic move? Why now, after years of silence, scandal, and strained family ties? What truth was buried deep enough to force a monarch to rewrite royal history? The answer isn't simple. It's layered with loyalty, resentment, and an unspoken promise made long before Meghan ever entered the picture. But before we get there, let's rewind to the very moment the world found out. A soft drizzle fell over London that morning. The palace press office had scheduled a routine announcement. Reporters gathered in their usual places, coffee cups in hand, expecting little more than an update on King Charles's charitable projects. But when the statement dropped, it detonated like a bomb in the middle of the royal landscape. His Majesty King Charles III has signed a historic decree reassigning the title of Duchess of Sussex to Her Royal Highness Zara Tindall in recognition of her lifelong service, integrity, and contribution to the crown. The air was sucked out of the room. One journalist dropped her pen. Another blinked, waiting for a correction. Zara Tindall? The equestrian Olympian? The granddaughter who didn't even have a royal title by choice? Surely this was an error. But no, it wasn't. Within minutes, the royal website confirmed it. A single photo accompanied the announcement. King Charles in his study, flanked by Princess Anne. Both were smiling, faintly, not with triumph, but with the quiet relief of people who had waited far too long to do the right thing. And just like that, history shifted. The internet erupted within seconds. Twitter melted. Royal watchers flooded timelines with disbelief and fury. Some called it poetic justice. Others screamed hypocrisy. Memes appeared faster than the palace could refresh its servers. The Duchess who didn't want to be royal, one headline read. The crown corrects history, said another. But amidst all the chaos, one question burned brighter than the rest. Why Zara? To understand that, you need to know who Zara really is and what she represents to King Charles. For decades, Zara Tindall had been the quiet storm of the royal family. She was born into the monarchy, but not bound by it. When the late Queen Elizabeth offered its children royal titles, princess, and refused. They will make their own way in life, she said firmly. And so they did. Zara grew up without the princess prefix, without the palace staff, without the endless restrictions of duty. While her cousins were taught the rules of etiquette and press management, Zara learned the rules of show jumping, endurance, and discipline. She married for love, not politics. She laughed in public, not from behind velvet curtains. And most importantly, she never once used her family name to climb higher. That alone made her one of the most respected figures in Britain's extended royal circle. But it also made her the complete opposite of Meghan Markle. Now pause for a moment. Can you imagine the irony? The woman who spent years demanding royal validation losing her title to the woman who had quietly avoided it her entire life? That's the twist King Charles knew would sting and heal in equal measure. The decision wasn't made overnight. Sources close to the palace say discussions began months earlier, long after the public grew weary of the Sussex controversies. Charles had been growing increasingly concerned with the erosion of royal integrity, a phrase he allegedly used in a private memo. Reports suggested he'd been quietly rewriting sections of the letters patent, the centuries-old documents that govern royal titles. He wanted to redefine what it meant to serve the crown, not by birthright, but by conduct. And Zara embodied that vision. She wasn't just a royal. She was a worker, a mother, an athlete, a citizen. While the Sussex brand turned into headlines and Netflix deals, Zara's name stayed attached to charity rides, hospital visits, and Olympic gold medals. She represented the royal family Charles wanted to preserve, the kind that didn't sell their story for sympathy. Still, this wasn't merely about values. There was something deeper at play, a quiet guilt, an old promise. According to palace insiders, King Charles's decision to bestow the Duchess of Sussex title upon Zara wasn't just a reaction to the Sussex scandal. It was the fulfillment of a private conversation between him and his late mother, a conversation that happened in the final months of Queen Elizabeth's reign. The Queen had allegedly told Charles that if the monarchy were ever to survive the modern world, it must reward authenticity over ambition. One day, she had said, the crown must rest upon those who serve, not those who seek. And so Charles waited. For years, he watched Zara embody that very principle without fanfare. She didn't chase headlines or sympathy. She simply lived with grace. Meanwhile, the Sussexes, once symbols of progress, had become lightning rods for chaos. And the contrast became impossible to ignore. But here's where things get interesting. This wasn't just a symbolic reassignment of titles. The Duchess of Sussex title carries enormous legal and territorial weight. It connects to ancient privileges, estates, and parliamentary representation in royal affairs. When Charles transferred it, he didn't just give Zara an honorary badge. He effectively stripped Meghan and Harry of the last formal tie they had to the monarchy. Can you picture the scene at Montecito when the news broke? One palace aide later described Meghan's reaction as nuclear. There were rumors of frantic calls to lawyers, emergency PR meetings, and a strategy crisis that lasted for days. Meghan allegedly demanded a public clarification, calling the decision unconstitutional. But the Crown, for once, refused to play defense. The decree was lawful. It was final, and it was signed with the King's seal. Behind closed doors, Charles reportedly said, "The Crown doesn't take titles. It reclaims them." That line alone tells you everything about his mindset. This wasn't just about punishing Meghan. It was about restoring meaning to titles that had become tabloid fodder. Now, let's not forget, this move was risky. Very risky. By reassigning such a high-profile title, Charles invited both political and public scrutiny. Advisors warned it could reignite debates about monarchy legitimacy, even provoke legal challenges. But the king went ahead anyway. Why? Because he was done watching the monarchy's dignity dissolve in real time. For months, he'd endured whispers of the Netflix royals, the mockery of Hollywood's Duke and Duchess, and endless headlines turning royal duty into a reality show. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was eroding everything the crown stood for. And when the Queen's final words echoed in his memory, "Reward those who serve," he knew there was only one person fit to bear the weight of that message: Zara. Still, even Charles didn't predict how this would unravel behind palace walls. Princess Anne's reaction was complex. She was proud of her daughter, but wary of what came next. She reportedly told Charles, "You've opened a door you can't close." To which he quietly replied, "Maybe it's time it stayed open." Zara herself was said to be stunned when she received the call. Friends described her as sitting in silence for nearly a minute before whispering, "Are you sure?" To which the king replied, "Yes, my dear. It's your turn to carry what others have dropped." That line would soon become legend. When Zara appeared in public days later, wearing a pale cream coat and a small sapphire brooch that once belonged to the Queen, the crowd outside Windsor burst into applause. It wasn't about glamour or power, it was about decency, about the quiet grace that Britain had missed in its royals. The media couldn't decide whether it was a redemption story or a rebellion. Commentators clashed live on air. Some called it a rebuke of Meghan's era of entitlement. Others saw it as the king's boldest act of modernization. But either way, the message was clear. The monarchy was rewriting its narrative, and this time, humility would lead. And that's when the undercurrents began to stir. Reports leaked that Meghan had demanded the right to contest the decree, arguing that her title was a gift of marriage, not merit. Lawyers debated, but history wasn't on her side. Under royal charter, titles exist at the monarch's discretion. In short, what the king gives, the king can take away. But still, questions remain. Why did Charles choose that exact title, Duchess of Sussex, to pass on? Why not create a new one? Why revive a name that carried so much scandal and sentiment? The answer may lie in a secret pact between Charles and Princess, and one forged decades earlier when the royal family was still healing from divorce scandals and tabloid wars. A pact that ensured, if ever the monarchy's honor was compromised, a Tindall would restore it. And if that sounds unbelievable now, just wait. Because buried in royal archives lies a document, one few have ever seen, that explains everything. A letter from the Queen herself, written in her own hand, sealed with the Windsor crest, containing a single prophecy that would redefine the royal bloodline. You see, this story isn't just about Zara inheriting a title. It's about a monarchy reclaiming its soul. It's about a king fulfilling a mother's dying wish, a daughter rising from the shadows, and a family finally confronting the legacy they tried to forget. So as the world debates this decree, as headlines twist and timelines burn, one truth remains. This wasn't an act of favoritism. It was an act of reckoning. And if you think the shock ends here, think again. Because behind the king's signature lies a series of hidden files, private investigations, personal letters, and secret conversations that prove this decree was years in the making. Some say those files could destroy reputations. Others whisper they could expose why Meghan Markle was never meant to be Duchess in the first place. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What came next wasn't a press release. It wasn't a tweet, or a photo leak, or a tabloid scoop. It was silence. A silence so heavy, so deliberate, that even the palace guards seemed to march softer that morning. Buckingham Palace, that grand fortress of pageantry and power, felt more like a stage just before the curtain rises on a play no one knows the ending to. It started with a single envelope. Delivered at dawn, sealed with the royal crest, and marked confidential, by hand only. The king's signature was already on it, but no one, not even the couriers, knew what it contained. Only 3 people were aware of its existence: King Charles, Princess and the royal aide who had been instructed to deliver it to the Privy Council chambers. The instruction was clear: no phone calls, no warnings, and no leaks. By 7:45 a.m., that envelope was on the polished oak table of the council room. The senior secretary stared at it for several minutes before breaking the seal. Inside, the document was simple. 5 paragraphs, 1 royal decree, and a line that made history. By my sovereign will, and under the powers vested in the crown, the title Duchess of Sussex is hereby transferred to Her Royal Highness Zara and Elizabeth Tindall. He read it twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else. But they didn't. They just sat there, cold, final, and world-changing. Within the hour, the press office was alerted. A scheduled announcement was arranged for noon. Yet before the clock could even strike 10, the whispers had already started. You could feel the tension ripple through the corridors of the palace. Staff exchanged cautious glances. Courtiers paused mid-step. Even the king's corgis seemed unusually still, sensing something monumental was unfolding above their heads. And upstairs, in his private study, King Charles stood by the window, motionless, teacup in hand, watching the fog roll over the palace gardens. His face betrayed nothing. To the untrained eye, he was calm. But to those who knew him well, that quiet meant everything. It meant the decision was made, and there was no turning back. This wasn't just a symbolic move. This was a royal thunderclap, a rewriting of protocol, a message written in ink and intent. But the real story began moments later, when the phone in the king's study rang. The number flashing on the screen wasn't unfamiliar. It was Clarence House, his old residence, now serving as one of the main administrative offices. The aide on the other end spoke softly. "Your Majesty, the Privy Council requests immediate clarification on the decree. They believe there's been an error." Charles didn't blink. He placed his cup down, picked up his pen, and said, "Tell them there's no error. History has simply corrected itself." Now, let's pause right there. Think about that statement. History has simply corrected itself. What did he mean by that? Was this an act of restoration, or a quiet act of revenge? As the palace scrambled to control the narrative, a storm was brewing across the Atlantic. In Montecito, the phone in Meghan and Harry's home buzzed with urgent notifications. At first, Meghan thought it was another rumor, another fake royal headline. But when her publicist confirmed it, her expression reportedly changed from disbelief to fury. "He can't do that," she shouted. "That's my title." Her team tried to calm her, explaining that technically, the title had always belonged to the crown, not the person. But logic had no place in that moment. This wasn't about legality. It was about identity, pride, and perception. And perception was everything to Meghan Markle. Meanwhile, back in London, Zara Tindall hadn't even spoken publicly. She was at her Gloucestershire home with her husband, Mike, when the news broke. According to friends, she looked stunned, pale, quiet, but composed. She reportedly said only one thing: "Mum's going to kill him for this." That him, of course, was King Charles. Princess Anne, who had been the king's confidant in this decision, wasn't pleased by the timing. She'd supported the idea in principle, rewarding Zara for her lifelong loyalty and hard work. But she'd warned Charles not to do it so suddenly. "You'll make it look like vengeance, not honor," she told him weeks earlier. But Charles had made up his mind. He wasn't acting out of anger. He was acting out of conviction, and perhaps a touch of guilt. Remember, for decades, Zara had been the quiet royal, overshadowed by scandal after scandal that had nothing to do with her. While other family members splashed across tabloids for affairs, feuds, and financial blunders, Zara had quietly built her own empire on integrity and discipline. She was everything the monarchy wanted to be seen as: grounded, strong, relatable. So when the king chose her, he wasn't just giving her a title. He was giving the monarchy a second chance at dignity. Still, there was one thing Charles didn't expect: the emotional chaos it would unleash inside his own family. Prince William was reportedly informed only an hour before the public. He was supportive but concerned about optics. "It's bold, father," he allegedly said during their brief call. "But you know what the press will do with it." Charles's response was simple: "Let them." Prince Harry, on the other hand, received no personal call, no warning, no message, just a breaking news alert like everyone else. When he saw the headline, his reaction was reportedly one of stunned silence. Not anger, not yet, just a kind of hollow disbelief. He looked at Meghan, then back at the screen. "They've taken it," he whispered. "They've actually taken it." Now imagine that moment. The title he and Meghan had used to brand themselves, to sign deals, to anchor their identity, gone, in a single royal stroke. But the king wasn't done. Just hours after the public statement, another envelope was delivered to a senior royal historian and advisor. Inside was a directive to prepare a statement about the historic evolution of royal titles and service. It was Charles's way of signaling that this wasn't an isolated act. It was part of a larger reform. The monarchy was moving into a new era, one that valued merit over marriage, service over celebrity. And yet, while London buzzed with speculation, the palace itself remained eerily quiet. No one spoke above a whisper. No one dared make eye contact with the king as he walked through the halls that evening. There was an invisible electricity in the air, like thunder waiting to strike. Even the press office, usually flooded with calls, seemed frozen. Reporters demanded quotes, but the official line remained the same: "His Majesty's decision is final and reflects the values of the modern monarchy." It was both diplomatic and devastating. By midnight, the global press had turned the story into a spectacle. Talk shows dissected it. Analysts debated whether this was constitutional. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Duchess Zara. Hashtag Royal Reclaim. Hashtag Meghan No More. But beneath the noise, inside the heart of the monarchy, something else was happening. Charles sat alone in his private library, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who had faced their own moments of reckoning. Henry VIII's arrogance, George VI's humility, Elizabeth II's restraint. Each had shaped the monarchy in their own way. And now, it was his turn. He pulled out a faded letter, one written in his mother's hand, and read it once more under the soft lamplight. It was the same letter that had haunted him for years. "When your time comes, choose not the loudest voice, but the truest heart." He folded it carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and whispered, "I hope I've done that, Mummy." But outside those walls, the royal machine was beginning to crack. Within hours, high-level aides began receiving inquiries from global media outlets demanding clarification. Why Zara? Why now? Was this a punishment or a promotion? Some reporters even suggested that Charles had acted out of spite, a claim the palace refused to acknowledge but couldn't entirely dismiss. The truth was more complex. Behind the king's decision lay months of private discussions, conversations between him and Princess and about the monarchy's future, about the meaning of titles, and about the danger of losing public trust. Those talks had led to the creation of a confidential initiative known only to a few insiders. Operation Restoration. Its mission? To restore the credibility of the royal family by re-evaluating titles that had been devalued through conduct unbecoming of royal duty. And guess which title sat at the top of that list? The Duchess of Sussex. So when the decree was signed, it wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. Every word had been reviewed by royal legal advisors, constitutional scholars, and heritage experts. Every seal had been verified. Every step had been planned to ensure that the decision would hold, not just legally, but morally. Still, even the best-laid plans can't control public emotion. Outside the palace gates, royal fans clashed with critics. Protesters waved signs reading, "Justice for Meghan," while others shouted, "Long live Zara." The monarchy had once again become a battlefield of ideals. Old versus new, tradition versus transformation. Through it all, Zara remained silent. She made no public appearances, issued no statements. But her friends hinted that she was struggling with the sudden attention. She never wanted this, one confidant told the press. Zara just wanted to ride horses and live her life. She didn't ask to become a symbol. But fate doesn't ask for permission. By the following evening, Buckingham Palace had become the epicenter of a media siege. Cameras lined the gates. Drones hovered overhead. Every royal car movement sparked speculation. And then, for the first time since the announcement, the palace curtains moved. A shadow appeared briefly at the window of the king's study. For a moment, photographers thought it was Charles. But when the light shifted, the outline was unmistakable: Princess Anne. She stood still, watching the crowd below, her expression unreadable. Some said she looked proud. Others thought she looked furious. But whatever she felt, it was clear she knew something the world didn't. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the reckoning. The day the palace fell silent wasn't about Zara receiving a crown. It was about everything the monarchy had refused to confront for years. Its failures, its favoritism, its fractures. And while the king believed he had finally done the right thing, there were forces gathering, both inside and outside the palace, ready to challenge him in ways he never anticipated. Because behind every royal decree, there's always a secret. And this one, it was about to explode. But before that happened, one sealed folder inside the king's desk, marked personal, eyes only, would find its way into the wrong hands. And the revelations inside that folder would change not just Zara's life, but the future of the British monarchy itself. What that folder contained would soon make even the most loyal subjects question everything they thought they knew about the crown, about the Sussex title, and about the Queen's final wish. And when those secrets surfaced, silence would no longer protect the palace. Because the truth, once whispered in private corridors, was about to roar through the gates of Buckingham itself. What makes a royal truly royal? Is it the bloodline, the title, or the way they carry themselves when no one's watching? That question haunted the monarchy for decades, but it found its answer not in the grandeur of palaces or the echo of trumpets, but in the quiet grace of a woman who never wanted to be royal at all. Before she was the Duchess of Sussex, before the headlines and the flashing cameras, Zara and Elizabeth Tindall was simply Zara Phillips, the girl who grew up with muddy boots, wind-tangled hair, and a heart set on horses, not crowns. Yet here she was, at the center of a royal storm. When King Charles signed that decree, the world rushed to see Zara's reaction. But there were no interviews, no triumphant photo ops, no statements crafted by publicists. Just a single grainy photo taken by a passerby, Zara walking out of a grocery store in Gloucestershire, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, her phone in hand, eyes lowered. That image said everything. The woman who had just become one of the most powerful figures in the monarchy didn't even pause to pose. And that's exactly why Charles chose her. Let's rewind. Long before she became a royal symbol of humility, Zara was born into one of the most powerful families in the world, yet without a title. Her mother, Princess Anne, had turned down royal titles for her children. She didn't want them burdened by the system that had controlled her entire life. They'll have to make their own way, and had told the Queen. And she meant it. So Zara grew up differently. While her cousins William and Harry were shadowed by security guards and trained for diplomacy, Zara was mucking out stables, riding bareback in the rain, and learning how to fall, literally. There's a saying in equestrian circles, "You're not a rider until you've fallen 7 times." Zara fell more than that, and each time she got back up with a laugh and a bruise. Her strength wasn't inherited, it was earned. She didn't attend exclusive finishing schools or host royal galas. Instead, she attended Gordonstown, the same school her grandfather, father, and uncle went to, but she wasn't treated differently. She played sports, got into trouble, and built friendships outside the royal bubble. That was the key difference. While Meghan Markle once said she felt like an outsider in the royal family, Zara had been raised outside of it by design, and yet she still carried the same blood that founded the dynasty itself. She understood the crown without being consumed by it. When Zara was 20, she shocked the palace by refusing any formal royal duties. Instead, she focused on her writing career. Critics scoffed. The tabloids called her the royal rebel. But she didn't care. "I just want to ride horses," she said in an interview. "That's all I've ever wanted." And she did. She became one of the most decorated British equestrians of her generation, an Olympian, a world champion, a figure of discipline and grace. In the mud, sweat, and roar of competition, Zara found something that no royal title could give her: purpose. Even the Queen admired it. "Zara's grounded," Her Majesty once said. "She's like her mother, strong, steady, and sensible." That was high praise coming from the monarch who'd seen her fair share of royal drama. But behind that admiration was something deeper, a quiet pride that one day would influence a king's decision. Now, let's talk about Zara's heart, because while royal history is filled with strategic marriages and arranged partnerships, hers was refreshingly human. In 2003, at the Rugby World Cup in Australia, Zara met Mike Tindall, a professional rugby player, strong, rugged, and famously down-to-earth. Their chemistry was instant. He wasn't intimidated by her lineage, and she wasn't impressed by his fame. They were equals from the start. Their relationship became the stuff of modern royal legend. Ordinary, yet extraordinary. No palace drama. No scandals. No thirst for the spotlight. Just two people who laughed together, built a home together, and raised a family without the media circus. When they married in 2011, there were no television deals, no billion-view broadcasts. Just a modest ceremony in Edinburgh with smiles, tears, and genuine joy. Compare that to Harry and Meghan's lavish, globally televised wedding in Windsor, and you see the contrast that would one day define Charles's fateful decision. While the world watched one couple chase attention, another quietly lived the royal values the monarchy had almost forgotten. But life wasn't always smooth for Zara. She faced setbacks, public scrutiny, financial struggles, even personal heartbreaks. Yet she faced them all with dignity. When tabloids criticized her husband's rough-around-the-edges background, she didn't respond with outrage or interviews. She simply said, "He's my rock." That's all people need to know. It was that same loyalty that impressed the Queen, and later, King Charles. In an era where royal image often meant manipulation, Zara represented authenticity. Here's something most people don't know. Behind the scenes, Zara quietly took on a role as an informal advisor to her uncle. Whenever Charles faced tension with the younger royals, especially after Harry's departure, it was Zara who urged him to stay calm. "Let the dust settle," she once told him. "People see through the noise eventually." And she was right. The king began to see her not just as a niece, but as a stabilizing force, the embodiment of what the monarchy should be. When Meghan and Harry started giving interviews about the firm, painting the palace as cold and unfeeling, Zara's quiet compassion provided a striking contrast. She didn't seek attention, yet her simple decency spoke louder than any televised confession ever could. Think about it. In a world obsessed with who said what, who wore what, and who betrayed whom, Zara's silence was her weapon. She didn't need to defend herself. She lived her truth. That truth became her crown long before Charles ever signed the decree. Now, fast forward to the moment the king's decision became public. Zara wasn't in London. She wasn't even near the palace. She was at her countryside estate, preparing for her next competition. When the call came in, she reportedly went quiet for several minutes. Her husband, Mike, asked if she was okay. She smiled faintly and said, "I suppose it's time to saddle up." That line became iconic within hours. Because for Zara, being Duchess of Sussex wasn't about prestige, it was about responsibility. The title had been stained by controversy, but under her, it represented something new, redemption. And yet, even as the world celebrated her grace, Zara wrestled with doubt. She'd never wanted royal life, and now it was being handed to her with all its weight. The public expected her to fix what others had broken. But here's where her character shone again. Instead of panicking, she prepared. She spent days studying the history of the title, understanding its origins, its symbolism, its connection to royal service. She wanted to earn it, not inherit it. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, senior aides began rebranding the Duchess of Sussex title in official documents. New emblems were commissioned. New statements were drafted. One internal memo reportedly read, "This transition marks a return to the crown's true values, humility, honor, and duty." It was the monarchy's quiet rebranding, and Zara became its face. But the reaction outside the palace was far from quiet. Public opinion split in two. Half the country saw Zara as the rightful heir to royal grace. The other half accused the crown of cruelty, of erasing Meghan's legacy. One British columnist wrote, "It's poetic justice. The woman who rejected her royal duties loses her title to the woman who never wanted it." Another countered, "It's medieval. The monarchy punishes independence by rewarding compliance." And yet, Zara refused to engage. She didn't issue statements or grant interviews. She focused on her family and her horses. The world spun around her, but she stayed still, calm, grounded, and quietly powerful. That stillness became her strength. Even King Charles noticed it. "She's more like her grandmother than anyone else," he reportedly told a friend. Steady under pressure. Always kind. Always composed. But as Zara embraced her new role, the undercurrents of tension within the royal family grew stronger. Not everyone was thrilled by the decision. There were whispers of resentment, that the king had favored his sister's daughter over his own son's wife. And then there was Meghan. In California, sources say she was preparing a response, a televised statement, or even a documentary that would reclaim her narrative. She allegedly told her team, "They may have taken the title, but they'll never take the story." What she didn't realize was that the king's decree wasn't just a legal move. It was a trap, one designed to expose every inconsistency in the Sussex's public persona. Charles knew the backlash would come. He also knew that every reaction from across the ocean would only prove his point, that Zara's quiet dignity carried more power than all the interviews in the world. But still, he worried. Because as much as Zara represented the monarchy's redemption, she also became its target. The media obsession grew relentless. Photographers followed her everywhere. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some even claimed she had been groomed for this role since childhood, a secret heir to restore balance. Ridiculous? Maybe. But in royal history, truth and rumor often dance too closely to tell apart. Late one night, after another wave of headlines, Zara reportedly called her mother. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said softly. "I just want to do right by the family." Anne's reply was blunt, as always. "Then do it quietly. That's how we win." That advice would soon become the strategy that saved the monarchy's image. But not before everything nearly fell apart again. Because as the world argued over Zara's new title, no one realized that deep inside the palace archives lay a forgotten letter from Queen Elizabeth herself. A letter that not only predicted this moment, but also named Zara as the one destined to carry the royal torch when chaos came. That letter would soon be discovered, and when it surfaced, it would blow open secrets about the monarchy's past that even Charles had tried to bury. And that discovery, that single piece of paper, would prove that Zara's rise wasn't just fate. It was prophecy. But before that letter saw the light of day, the royal family had to survive something far more explosive: Meghan Markle's reaction. Because while Zara remained silent, Meghan was about to go public. And her next move would turn a royal decree into a global war. It started with a scream. Not a dramatic movie scream, but a guttural, unfiltered one, the kind that cuts through silence like shattered glass. Neighbors in Montecito said they heard it around 7:30 a.m. California time. The birds went quiet. The dogs started barking. Then came the slam of a door. Inside the glass-walled mansion that once symbolized freedom from royal life, Meghan Markle stood frozen in disbelief, her phone trembling in her hand as the headline flashed across the screen. "King Charles strips Duchess of Sussex title." reassigns it to Zara Tindall. For a few seconds, she thought it was satire, one of those parody tabloids that twisted news for clicks. But then she saw it, the official royal crest, the king's seal, and the BBC breaking the story with the words "historic decree." Her heart dropped. She reread it. Once, twice, 3 times. Each word dug deeper. Reassigns. To Zara Tindall. It felt like betrayal. No, it was betrayal. She'd spent years fighting for recognition, shaping the Sussex identity into her brand, her armor. Every public appearance, every podcast, every charitable effort was tied to that title. Without it, who was she in the eyes of the world? She turned toward Harry, who sat on the couch, his face pale, staring blankly at the TV. "Say something," she snapped. But he didn't. He just looked at her, eyes heavy with the same disbelief that had taken hold of the world. "It's gone," he said quietly. "The title. It's gone." Meghan's voice cracked. "He can't do that. He can't." But deep down, she knew he could. The monarch holds absolute authority over royal titles. The same power that once gave her the name could take it away, with a single pen stroke. She began pacing, back and forth, hands shaking, thoughts spiraling. "This isn't about the title," she muttered. "This is about humiliation. He's using Zara to erase me, to make an example out of me." Harry tried to calm her, but she wasn't listening. The phone rang. It was her publicist in Los Angeles. "Meghan, we've confirmed it's official. The decree was signed yesterday. It's already been enacted. The media's going wild." Meghan's jaw clenched. "I want a statement drafted now. We're going to fight this. Legally, publicly, whatever it takes. This isn't over." But the publicist hesitated. "Meghan, with respect, fighting this might not help. The narrative is already turning. People are calling Zara the true Duchess. Even your supporters are." "Don't say it," Meghan hissed. "Don't you dare say it." But the damage was already spreading. Across social media, fans were torn. Some defended Meghan fiercely. Others praised Zara's humility. Royal commentators flooded the airwaves, describing the move as Charles's quiet act of restoration. Every network carried the story. Every headline compared Meghan's ambition to Zara's grace. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. While Meghan's team scrambled to strategize, the palace maintained silence. And that silence hurt more than any statement ever could, because it told the world the king didn't owe her an explanation. But what the public didn't know was that Meghan wasn't just angry. She was terrified. You see, the title wasn't just symbolic. It was the cornerstone of their brand. Without it, their business empire, the deals, the sponsorships, the influence, began to wobble. Overnight, phone calls that once ended with "the Duchess will consider it" suddenly carried less weight. Even Netflix executives, once eager to collaborate, reportedly began re-evaluating their contracts. The royal link was the draw, one insider admitted. Without it, they're just another celebrity couple. And that was Meghan's greatest fear, to go from royal to regular. In the days that followed, Meghan went into crisis mode. She called meetings, hired new lawyers, and even reached out to royal advisors from her past, the very people she had once criticized publicly. Desperation has a way of erasing grudges. According to one palace insider, Meghan's legal team sent an inquiry to Buckingham Palace demanding clarification on the reallocation of the Duchess of Sussex title. It was phrased politely, but the tone was unmistakable, a veiled threat. The palace responded with 4 words. "The decree is final. No elaboration. No emotion. Just royal finality." That's when Meghan's anger turned volcanic. She ordered her PR team to prepare a statement, not just a press release, but a televised response. Something emotional, polished, and designed to reclaim control of the narrative. The goal wasn't just damage control. It was retaliation. But here's the twist. As she prepared to step in front of the camera, a single phone call changed everything. It came from London, an unknown number. Meghan hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, unmistakable. "This is the King's office. His Majesty wishes to convey his regards." Her throat tightened. "If this is about the decree." The aide interrupted softly. "The King asks that you respect his decision. This is not personal, but necessary. The crown must protect its integrity." Meghan's jaw clenched. "Integrity? You're calling this integrity?" There was silence. Then came the final words before the line went dead. "The crown does not explain itself, Mrs. Markle. Notice that. Mrs. Markle, not Duchess, not even Her Royal Highness. It was a message hidden in plain sight. She was no longer one of them. That night, she didn't sleep. She wandered through the mansion, lights dimmed, memories flashing back to her wedding day. The tiara, the cheers, the vows. To love, honor, and obey. The irony stung. Harry found her sitting by the window, staring into the dark. "It's not over," she whispered. "He thinks he's won, but it's not over." Harry rubbed his face, exhausted. "Meg, what are you planning?" She turned to him, eyes blazing. "I'm going to remind the world who I am." And with that, she made a decision that would set off one of the most public royal confrontations in modern history, a plan that would involve leaked footage, hidden letters, and one explosive interview. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the British press was relentless. Every morning, new headlines painted Meghan as the dethroned Duchess. Talk shows debated whether the move was punishment or reform. Some called it cruel. Others called it justice. One headline summed it up perfectly. Meghan's fall, Zara's rise. A tale of two duchesses. But here's what no one saw coming. The one person who refused to gloat was Zara herself. When reporters cornered her outside her stables, asking for comment, she smiled politely and said, "Titles don't change who we are. What matters is how we carry them." Then she mounted her horse and rode away. No PR team, no cameras, just quiet dignity. That clip went viral in minutes. Commentators called it the royal mic drop of the decade. Because while Meghan planned an orchestrated comeback, Zara's calm words stole the world's sympathy in 10 seconds flat. Meghan saw it too, and it infuriated her. "She's playing the humble card," she told her team. "And it's working." But Meghan wasn't done. She began reaching out to journalists, familiar names from her earlier media circuits. The goal? To reshape the story into one of injustice and revenge. A modern-day David versus Goliath narrative, Meghan versus the crown. It might have worked, too, if not for what happened next. Late one evening, as Meghan's PR team drafted her upcoming interview questions, a former royal staffer leaked a document to a British newspaper. It was a transcript. Internal communications from Buckingham Palace. And in that document was a sentence that stunned the world. The decision to reassign the Duchess of Sussex title is based on previously undisclosed information regarding conduct inconsistent with royal duty. Conduct inconsistent with royal duty. The phrase was deliberate, vague, damning, and impossible to refute. Within hours, the media exploded. What conduct were they referring to? Rumors swirled, from secret recordings to confidential letters. Some whispered it involved financial misuse tied to charitable ventures. Others suggested it was about Meghan's alleged private communications with foreign media during her royal years. The palace, of course, refused to confirm or deny anything. But the seed was planted. The narrative shifted overnight. Meghan's planned interview suddenly looked dangerous. Her advisors begged her to cancel, warning that pushing back could trigger the release of more evidence. But she refused. "They're not silencing me again," she said. Harry, caught in the middle, was breaking. Torn between love and loyalty, between the wife who felt betrayed and the father who was finally acting like a king. One night, after another heated argument, he reportedly told Meghan, "You don't understand. When he makes a move like this, it's because he's already covered every angle. You can't win this fight." Her response was cold. "Then maybe I'll fight another way." And she did. Within 2 weeks, Meghan filmed an emotional interview from their home, a carefully lit setup designed to look raw and intimate. She spoke of pain, betrayal, and the silencing machine of the monarchy. She didn't mention Zara by name, but referred to those who benefit from my downfall. It was powerful, emotional, and very, very strategic. The internet exploded again. Hashtags trended. Supporters cried. Critics scoffed. The war of perception reignited. But the real shock came 48 hours later when Buckingham Palace responded. Not with words, but with action. A senior royal correspondent leaked that the king had authorized a review of all titles and honors linked to royal service. And that meant one thing. Meghan's interview had backfired spectacularly. Because instead of appearing as the victim, she had triggered an investigation that would expose far more than anyone was prepared for. And while the world dissected her every word, something much quieter was happening behind closed doors in Windsor Castle. something that would change the entire trajectory of this royal war. A locked red folder had been moved from the king's private vault to his legal advisors. It contained years of correspondence, internal reports, and a handwritten letter from the Queen herself. That folder, the one Meghan didn't know existed, held the answers to why this decree was inevitable. And once its contents leaked, every claim, every accusation, every story would unravel. But before that truth could surface, something else happened, something that would turn the tension into full-blown crisis. Because one member of the royal family, someone Zara trusted completely, was about to break their silence. And when they did, the world would realize that the fight over a title was only the beginning of something much, much bigger. Every royal house has secrets, but not all secrets are buried. Some are simply waiting for the right moment to detonate. When King Charles signed the decree naming Zara Tindall as the new Duchess of Sussex, most people thought it was an act of pride or punishment. But deep inside the king's private vault at Buckingham Palace, the real reason lay locked away in a crimson leather folder marked with a single word: integrity. The story of that folder begins months before the decree, in a part of the palace few ever see, a narrow, wood-paneled corridor leading to the king's private study. It was there that Charles would spend late nights, long after the lights of London faded, reading reports, letters, and transcripts that painted a picture of his family he wished weren't true. It wasn't rage that fueled him. It was disappointment. A deep, quiet disappointment that had grown heavier with every scandal, every leaked interview, every reminder that the monarchy, his mother's life's work, was being dragged through the mud by those who were supposed to protect it. But this time, Charles wasn't going to stand by. He ordered a review, discreet, comprehensive, and entirely off the books. No official seals, no public acknowledgement. The team that carried it out wasn't composed of palace aides or royal courtiers. It was led by a handful of former intelligence officers, historians, and one legal expert who had worked on the Diana inquiry decades earlier. Their task was simple, but dangerous. Find out exactly what had been done under the title Duchess of Sussex. Every communication, every contract, every deal, every meeting that might have tied the monarchy's name to scandal or exploitation. For months, they worked in silence, combing through records, tracing communications, and reconstructing the timeline of events from the moment Meghan Markle entered royal life to the day she stepped away. What they uncovered would stun even the king himself. At first, it was minor: protocol breaches, unapproved interviews, emails sent without royal authorization. But then, the deeper they went, the darker it got. There were financial inconsistencies, charitable funds transferred through intermediaries that didn't align with royal donation procedures, meetings with individuals flagged by the Foreign Office for questionable dealings, media contracts negotiated while still under royal designation. Charles didn't want to believe it. He'd always wanted to think Meghan was simply misunderstood, a woman overwhelmed by the pressures of royal life. But the documents in that red folder suggested something more deliberate, more damaging. The crown's reputation hadn't just been bruised. It had been sold. He read everything, sometimes twice, sometimes through tears. The monarchy had survived wars, divorces, and deaths. But betrayal from within was harder to mend. Still, Charles wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for closure. The Queen's last months had been filled with sorrow over her family's division. She had written him a letter, one that would become the moral compass behind every decision he made as king. "Do not seek retribution," she had written. "Seek restoration." That was the phrase Charles underlined in ink. Restoration, not revenge. So he made a plan. A quiet, deliberate plan that would restore the dignity of a title that had become a lightning rod of controversy. He knew the Duchess of Sussex title couldn't remain vacant. It carried too much historical and symbolic importance. It represented the union of duty and compassion, a bridge between the crown and the people. And right now, it was a bridge on fire. That's when his thoughts turned to Zara. Zara, who had never exploited her royal lineage. Zara, who had served quietly and faithfully without expectation. Zara, whose mother had once said, "We serve best when we serve silently." Charles realized that by passing the title to her, he wasn't erasing Meghan. He was redeeming what the title stood for. But before he could make that decision public, he had to be certain the evidence, the contents of that crimson folder, would withstand scrutiny. And so, the files were verified by a royal legal advisor known only by his code name, the archivist. The archivist was an expert in royal documents, trained to identify forged letters, misquoted statements, and fabricated media leaks. His report was simple. The documents were authentic, unaltered, and damning. Charles's heart broke as he read them. He didn't release them, though. Not yet. He knew the monarchy couldn't survive another public scandal. But he also knew he couldn't allow history to repeat itself. So he sealed the folder, wrote one final note on its cover, "For eyes of the monarch only," and placed it in his vault. That was the same folder later seen being quietly moved to his legal team's office in Windsor after Meghan's interview aired. But here's the irony. Charles never wanted the world to see what was inside that file. He wanted it to remain a silent reason, not a public weapon. A shield, not a sword. Unfortunately, secrecy doesn't last long in a palace built on whispers. Because someone, we still don't know who, took a photograph of that folder being delivered to the king's advisors. The image leaked online within hours. And once the internet got hold of it, the conspiracy machine roared to life. The Red File, the Sussex dossier, the Meghan papers. Speculation spiraled. Some claimed it contained proof of financial misconduct. Others said it held transcripts of private conversations between Meghan and journalists. There were even wild theories that it included letters between Meghan and foreign diplomats. Evidence, they claimed, of royal exploitation for political gain. The truth, of course, was less cinematic but far more damaging. According to insiders, the dossier included correspondence showing repeated breaches of royal confidentiality, moments where private palace discussions were referenced in public statements or media narratives. It also contained internal reports linking certain charity partnerships to self-promotional ventures without crown approval. It was the accumulation of small fractures that, when placed together, painted a picture of deep betrayal. And that's why Charles acted. Not out of spite, but out of duty. To him, titles weren't just ornamental. They were promises. Promises to uphold the integrity of the crown, to represent its values honestly. And when those promises were broken, they had to be reclaimed. Still, the king knew that revealing the existence of the dossier would unleash chaos. So he instructed his advisors to remain silent, to neither confirm nor deny anything. But silence, in the modern age, speaks louder than words. Within days, international outlets began to dig. Old associates were interviewed. Former staff members hinted at unusual activity. And soon, the rumor mill became unstoppable. Meanwhile, Zara remained blissfully unaware of the storm building around her. She didn't know about the red folder. She didn't know that her new title had been born from scandal and secrecy. To her, it was simply an honor she intended to live up to. But fate had other plans. Because just when the palace believed it had contained the situation, an anonymous email arrived in the inbox of a prominent royal journalist. The subject line read, "You should see what's inside the red folder." Attached was a single scanned page, blurry, but legible enough to read a date, a signature, and one devastating sentence. Certain public statements made by the Duchess of Sussex appear inconsistent with verified royal communications. That one line was enough. It didn't name anyone. It didn't accuse anyone directly. But it implied dishonesty, and implication is the most dangerous weapon in royal warfare. By morning, the front pages of newspapers screamed with headlines about the hidden truth. News anchors asked if the king had acted to protect the monarchy or to cover up a deeper family feud. Even Prince William, who had supported his father's decision in private, began to worry about the optics. "If this leaks completely," he warned, "it will tear us apart again." Charles stayed silent. He'd been through too many storms to panic. But deep down, he knew that secrecy was no longer safety, it was liability. That night, he summoned his most trusted advisor, Sir Malcolm Reed, and gave a simple instruction: prepare for controlled disclosure. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" Reed asked. Charles's eyes hardened. "If the truth must come out, it will come out on my terms, not theirs." The plan was to release a carefully worded statement acknowledging the existence of an internal review while reaffirming that no legal wrongdoing had occurred. It was a move meant to balance transparency with dignity. But before that statement could be drafted, something else happened, something Charles hadn't accounted for. Someone inside the palace copied the full contents of the dossier onto a USB drive and smuggled it out. Within 48 hours, it was in the hands of a journalist known for exposing political scandals, a journalist with no loyalty to the monarchy, no fear of backlash, and no hesitation to publish. The article was already being written, and once it went live, every royal secret Charles had tried to protect would be laid bare for the world to devour. He didn't know it yet, but the leak would come from someone inside his own circle, someone who believed the world deserved the truth, no matter the cost. And when the story broke, it wouldn't just expose the past. It would ignite a new wave of crisis that would pull Zara and Harry and even the Queen's legacy into the line of fire. Because the red folder wasn't just about what Meghan had done. It contained something else. A revelation so personal, so explosive, that it would rewrite everything the public thought they knew about the royal family's inner bond. The kind of revelation that could destroy a dynasty. And the clock was already ticking. The night before Queen Elizabeth's passing, Buckingham Palace was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of a clock outside her private chambers. Staff moved quietly through the corridors, their faces pale with concern. Her Majesty was frail, her words softer, but her mind, sharp as ever. And among the handful of people permitted to see her that evening, one visitor stood apart from the rest, her granddaughter, Zara Tindall. No cameras, no reporters, no protocol, just a grandmother and her granddaughter. One a monarch at the twilight of her reign, the other a woman who had never sought the spotlight, but had somehow always been destined to carry its light. The Queen had asked specifically for Zara that evening. Not William, not Charles, not even Anne. Send for Zara, she'd said. I need to speak to her privately. When Zara entered the room, the Queen's face softened with recognition. She motioned for her to come closer. You look just like your mother when she was your age, she whispered. Zara smiled through the tears already threatening to fall. And you still look like the Queen, she said gently, her voice cracking. The old monarch chuckled, a sound that carried warmth and memory. That's because I still am, she said. For a little while longer. What followed wasn't recorded. It wasn't written down. But fragments of that conversation would later echo through the corridors of power, whispered by those who were told just enough to understand its significance. Zara never spoke publicly about that final talk. But those who knew her best said she came out of that room a changed woman. Her expression wasn't grief, it was purpose. So what exactly did the Queen tell her? According to one royal insider, who later confided in a historian, the Queen made Zara a promise, not of privilege, but of responsibility. She told her that the monarchy would one day be tested in ways it had never been before. That truth and duty would become weapons in a war of perception. And when that time came, the crown would need someone uncorrupted by ambition to restore its honor. Titles, the Queen said softly, are not meant to glorify the holder. They are meant to guard the people's trust. When others misuse them, they fall to you to protect. Then came the words that would become legend. One day, it will be yours. At first, Zara thought her grandmother meant the horses, the Windsor stables, their shared love. But as the years passed, she realized the old Queen had meant something far greater, the spirit of the monarchy itself. And that prophecy, that quiet, private promise, was the invisible thread that would later connect Charles's decree to Zara's rise as Duchess of Sussex. But to understand its weight, you have to go back further, to Zara's childhood, where the bond between her and the Queen was unlike any other in the royal family. Unlike the formal relationships Elizabeth had with most of her grandchildren, Zara's was grounded in laughter, mischief, and genuine affection. The Queen adored her bluntness, her refusal to bow unnecessarily, her tendency to call things as she saw them. Zara could make her laugh in ways no diplomat or minister ever could. She reminds me of Margaret, the Queen once told, and, half joking, but without the drama. They shared a love of horses, of country life, of simple honesty. The Queen saw in Zara what she'd always wished the monarchy could be, real. So when scandals began to tear through the royal institution in her later years, the divorces, the media wars, the headlines about Harry and Meghan, she often turned to Zara for perspective. She doesn't want the crown, the Queen once told an aide, and that's precisely why she deserves to wear it in spirit. Those private remarks, long forgotten, would gain chilling significance years later when Charles acted on his mother's unspoken wish. Because, make no mistake, the Queen's promise wasn't poetic. It was prophetic. In the months before her death, Elizabeth had quietly begun drafting a document, a personal codicil to her private will, detailing her hopes for how the monarchy should evolve after her passing. It wasn't legally binding, but it was spiritually authoritative. Buried within that document, in her own handwriting, was a line that historians would later call the sovereign's whisper. It read, "In matters of honor and truth, let the legacy of Sussex be guided by one who serves without seeking." Zara Tindall's name was not written, but it didn't need to be.